The information provided in this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be construed as investment, tax, legal, or other professional advice. All opinions expressed by the host or guest are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of QP Consulting LLC or its affiliates. Past performance is not indicative of future results. Investing involves risk, including the possible loss of principal. Listeners should consult their financial advisor or other professionals before making any investment decisions. QP Consulting LLC is a registered investment advisor. Registration does not imply a certain level of skill or training. For more information, including our disclosures and Form ADV, please visit qp-consulting.com. Hello and welcome to The Jagged Path with Mark Ivsevich, where we discuss people, their careers, the U.S. retirement system, and the many indirect ways people move through their working years towards retirement. Today we have Rob with us, and Rob worked at VOA, which is the Voice of America, and is originally from Bowie, Maryland. He currently lives in Washington, D.C., and Rob had been with VOA since 2005 and previously did camera work for the Democratic Policy Committee. So welcome to the show, Rob, and thanks for joining us.
Oh, great. Thanks, Mo. Thanks for having me.
Rob, actually, for those that won't have seen the first cut, we tried this previously, and we had some technical difficulties, so we're going to go ahead and re-record this with some different questions. But I wanted to start with a few that are kind of, revisiting things we asked before. So tell us, Rob, about the type of work you did at VOA, because I don't think a lot of people probably here in the States know a ton of what VOA did or does.
Oh, well, VOA, it started back in World War II, and they broadcast radio count German Nazi propaganda stuff, and they just programmed to counter that.
And the modern programming of that, Rob, so that also I know became a big part of like our efforts in the Cold War to counteract, Russian disinformation. And what was, so now that we're in an era of, you might look at other foreign states that have their own information or disinformation regimes that are kind of out there. What was VOA doing currently, like kind of in the 2020s?
Just programming television to 40 different languages across the world, places where you can't really, there's not really open media. So VOA was involved with that.
Okay. And in that, what was your, kind of walk us through what a normal day for you would have been like? So here in DC, what sort of camera work were you doing?
Okay. Well, it could be a number of things. It could be a lot of something going live from the Capitol or the White House, or it could be an interview, a sit-down interview with the congressperson. It did vary.
And so what about the stuff? So I know the things that were potentially controversial with VOA, like some of the editorial or maybe some of the documentary work they did. Were you involved in any of that sort of work, or was your work strictly just kind of the DC base? Hey, we're interviewing Senator so-and-so or Congresswoman so-and-so.
For the most part, yeah. It could be varied topics. It could be anything. It could be interviews or live shots.
So I was, so the annual budget of VOA is around $270 million, and employees have been what here in DC is referred to as RIF. We love our acronyms here in Washington, DC. As a comparison, BBC would be something comparable. Their budget's around $7.7 billion. And Al Jazeera would be another, kind of government entity, news network for a foreign entity. Their budget's over $1 billion. During our first attempted recording, we discussed you spending time at the well-known skater hangout, Pulaski Park. And for those not from D.C., this is a stretch of Pennsylvania Avenue that's between the Capitol and the White House. And how did you find yourself going, Rob, from a skater at Pulaski to being a cameraman? Who kind of influenced your interest in camera work?
There were always cameras around. And like still cameras, my dad was just a still camera, so I had an interest there. Really just, I got the opportunity to work in news when I was working at the Senate. But I had an interest in music, so I kind of put the two skill sets together, like still photography, and had an understanding of basic sound equipment. So I was able to translate those two into doing television. And I got the opportunity to start working in TV when I worked at the Senate.
So you mentioned too that interests were music and camera work. And I didn't ask you this the first go around. So in 2012, I think it was, you worked on a documentary about Paul H.R. Hudson from Bad Brains called
Oh
Finding
yeah,
Joseph I.
yeah.
And for those not familiar with Bad Brains, they were an all-black punk band from DC in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. How long did that project take, and how did you guys finance it and pay for it?
Uh, it took about I think about 10 years to make.
Oh wow.
It took a long time. It took a long time. I think it was about 10 years. Maybe I'm wrong about that number.
And what about the
Um,
financing, Rob? Like, did you learn any
well, it
financial
was
lessons from doing that?
yeah, yeah. Don't make your own money. Don't find other people to fund something. I mean, it was a passion project. So it's I didn't expect you to ask me this question, but it's one of those things that I would have done. Um, we funded it out of our pockets. Really, I mean, when you fund something like that, it and you've never made a film before. This is a tough question.
Well, I remember there was you guys did a Kickstarter or something too. So,
Yeah.
so you had some friends and family type stuff as
Yeah,
well.
we did do that. We did do that. My bad. We did do that.
I'm still
We did
trying.
do that.
Yeah, but to me, it's
I
interesting
think
when
everybody
someone,
got there.
yeah,
It
when
was.
someone has a passion project, like how they kind of go about doing it, and like
Oh man.
if
Well,
there's
first of all, it was the first film I'd ever been involved in making, so there's a lot I didn't know. So let me preface this whole conversation by saying that I'd been in uh, television for many years and worked on uh, worked in the record industry a little bit and understood how entertainment and media works, but I never made a film before. There were a lot of things I didn't know that if it was today, I would have made some different choices on how to go about funding it. I think we may not have had to spend so much money out of our pockets in the beginning and do Kickstarters if we known what we know now.
okay, yeah, no, understood. And then let me ask that: are you still in touch with HR at all?
Oh yeah, I talk to him often. He calls me often. Yeah,
Really?
I speak to
How's
him
he
often.
doing for those of our punk
He-
fan listeners?
He's I think he's doing okay. I know he's out on the road doing what he loves to do, and he keeps me up to date on what he's up to. Um, and it's great to make that relationship through the process of making the movie. He's really a hero of mine. Super fortunate to now call him a friend.
That's fantastic. I think those sorts of passion projects. It's interesting, that of course this is about money and financial wellness, but also it's about kind of how people find themselves doing different, whether it's passion projects or jobs or odds and ends and things.
Yeah.
So I did want to certainly ask that. In terms of jumping into the money stuff, what I think we asked this last time, kind of what you said, okay, maybe the film in doing this, there are some things you could have financed differently, but what are the other end of finances? Like what's kind of been the best financial move you've ever made, whether it was an accidental or an intentional one on your end?
I'll probably buy a house for me, and that's probably uh, the best decision that I made because if you know how rent is in DC, it's probably cheaper to own something. Luckily, I've been fortunate to own something than it is to rent at this point.
How'd you pull together the down payment on that? Because for those not from the DC area, obviously, this is universal across the states right now. A real big problem for people is just the costs have skyrocketed, and so for someone just looking to finance and put down, enough to get in the door, how'd you scrape that together?
Well, I saved up some money. Um, I may have, if I can remember correctly, it was 2010. I may have saved up. I know I saved up some money. I may have pulled some money out of my TSP. Uh,
When you pulled that money, Rob, did you have to stop contributing to the TSP at that point, or were you able to keep saving in the
Oh
TSP?
yeah, I think you just, I think you just, well, you're really borrowing it from yourself. I think that's how it works, and you're paying yourself back, and you're still contributing out of your paycheck weekly.
Gotcha. So you were able to keep contributing, and I'll rewind. I'll give our listeners kind of a summary because TSP is the thrift savings plan. So it would be the government's form of like a 401k or 403b that exists in the not-for-profit space. And the TSP has operated a little bit differently. So like the first 401k plan was created around November of 1978. TSP was created as part of the Federal Employees Retirement System Act of 1986. The Roth 401k, for instance, you can contribute either on a pre-tax basis to your 401k today, same thing with the TSP, or now on the TSP, you can contribute on a Roth basis, meaning you pay taxes today, grows tax deferred, and then in retirement, you can take it out tax-free. We always tell people, hey, it doesn't matter how you do it, you just need to get started. And then if you really want to dig into your tax returns and what's maybe the optimal way to do it, we can have that discussion. But TSP has always lagged a little bit, the innovation that's happened in the for-profit space. So TSP added that Roth option in 2012, about 6 years after 401ks made it available. Going a step further, for instance, a lot of us have what are called life cycle or target date funds in our 401ks and 403bs. TSP introduced that a little bit later as well. The first ones of those came about in the mid-1990s, and then they were really kind of turbocharged due to some legislation around automatically getting people into plans, which TSP started in 2010. TSP matches 100% to the first 3% and 50% on the next two. And then depending on what agency you work at, they have to also put in 1%. Your agency puts in 1% as a company contribution. Rob, do you recall, I think we asked this first time, but how and why did you get started in TSP in the first place? What was kind of the event, or maybe it was a coworker, what got you going to say, oh, you know what, I probably need to save for something that's 20, 30, 40 years down the road?
Yeah. I mentioned that I worked at the Senate, and I was in it then. And I didn't know, I thought it was just something you probably should do, from the start. I think that I made the choice when I was in the Senate to start contributing to it.
So you didn't have was money talked about around the house? Did you have a brother or sister? No.
No. I don't think my parents had any kind of retirement plans. You know what I mean? It wasn't something that my parents, they told us to make sure we paid our bills, and anything after that, it was luxury.
And what about school stuff? Were you ever out in school and they were like, hey, here's kind of basic finance 101 stuff? Or
not at all. This we're talking about the 70s and 80s, you know what I mean? 90s. I graduated high school in 91. I know that early on in maybe junior high, there was something called home economics. I'm dating myself. There was something called home ec, and I think that there may have been something about, how to write a check, you know what I mean?
Right.
That kind of thing, you know what I mean? How to write a check, how to,
Yeah. Well, that's one of the lessons I think too, that I always tell people when I'm sitting down with them individually is they shouldn't have any, not only the concept of not having dumb questions, but they shouldn't have any shame in not knowing this stuff either, because when it comes to like what's a stock versus what's a bond and why you should own one thing versus another thing and how much you should save, you probably have never learned that, regardless if you got your PhD or if you graduated from high school or somewhere in between. So it's something I think for as Americans, that's why I hope, a show like this, you can kind of get people out to talk about, hey, money can be an uncomfortable topic. I think like money and death are two things people hate talking about, but are very, very practical.
Yeah.
So I'll give folks some stats here too. According to Fidelity, in the second quarter of 2025, the average balance, and this is a 401k, but still the equivalency is one and the same. It just depends on where you're working. For 44 to 59-year-olds, and I'm not going to date you, Rob, but I'm just going to say you're somewhere in that range, was $187,400. Now, the average federal worker stays for 12 years versus the average private sector worker typically switches jobs just under about every 4 years. So, Rob, in terms of savings, what you have in your TSP, are you north or south? Are you above that number for the average 44 to 59-year-old?
What was the number again, Mark?
187,400.
What you're asking if I'm above, a little
Correct.
bit, a little bit at this point.
Okay. And
Above
what about with so the one thing that we started with with VOA was that uh, agency. I mean, it hasn't been completely eliminated and it's in the courts, and this won't really probably be published until well after that. But VOA, as we know it, at least, appears to be going away, and there's a reduction in force. So basically, you'll be out looking for work. Do you have a plan for how you're going to replace the income loss from your work at this point?
I have an idea. I don't know whether or not it's going to work or not. I mean, I plan on trying to use the skills that I obtained over the past 20 years to carry me through the next, 15. I don't know how much longer I'm going to have to work, but I know I'm going to have to work. So hopefully I'm going to try freelance work and use those skills to try to move forward, maybe pivot and make some changes in technology to, enhance those skills to move forward.
And what would what's kind of your runway? Like how much do you have saved in an emergency savings? Maybe not the dollar amount, but the amount of time that would buy you.
Uh, I probably have, I don't know, maybe 6 months, 6 months to try to figure out what this meal was going to be.
Tell us about, so one of the things that federal employees have with this Federal Employee Retirement Savings Act is a pension. And I mentioned, I won't bore people to tears, but pensions used to exist in the private sector with employees moving, every 4 years. People didn't accumulate a lot of benefits, but also they were more expensive for employers. And with globalization, you had a lot of industries, primarily airlines and steel, that kind of created some serious problems with the pension system here in the US. But the federal pension system exists. And you've been, as we mentioned, you've been at VOA for 20 plus years. So what's that pension look like? And is that going to be part of the income story for you here going forward in the next 12, 18 months?
Yes, definitely. I mean, it's one of the reasons, I think it's one of the reasons people, outside caring about what they do is that the reasons people want to work for the government, right?
Right.
Isn't that kind of because it still exists? And I mean, it may not be much at this point. Yeah, it's going to be how I calculate my reality in the future.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely, one of the promises of what I see is, let's say you're here in the DMV and you're working in the private sector, your pay may be higher. It in all likelihood is relative to an equivalent federal employee job, but you don't have the same job stability. And one of the things that, with the efforts of DOJ and a lot of agencies in the upheaval recently, the past, 6, 8 months here, is that that's kind of been turned on its head, where you now don't have that consistency that you're expecting. But the pension has always been a very attractive piece, both for military as well as for other non-military civilian workers in the federal workforce as well. So I think it'll be interesting to see kind of how future federal workers perceive that trade-off, because that's something that's always kind of been promised or viewed as being pretty consistent in the past. The average U.S. worker, we'll kind of finish on this and then I'll see if you have any follow-up questions for me. But the average U.S. worker, it says, will have about 12.7 jobs through their career, and that's according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. How many of those like odd jobs? It sounds like you've had 2 jobs for a really, really long time. If you go back to from age 18 forward, how many jobs do you think you've had, just to see how you compare to that average U.S. worker?
At 18, I was probably working and doing some like restaurant kitchen work, and I think I did that at many places for until I was about 25. Yeah.
And then from 25 on, you've had what, about 2 jobs?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's if we're counting the paying ones, not including the passion projects and things like that. Too.
Yeah. And I had, I did, and like I said, I did music, so that took up a lot of my time, and I was able to, well, not have to make a lot of money at that time because there wasn't a whole lot of money to be made.
And what about, so let's go into kind of a question that you might have. Is there any general financial wellness question, or as you're going through this kind of new financial phase in your life where the next paycheck isn't known at this point? Are there questions you have for me at all today, Rob, in terms of anything retirement related or going outside of that realm?
I think that we've had some discussions about, trying to, like we talked about earlier, like, I don't have a ton of financial literacy from the jump. So communicating with someone like yourself about how to budget my life to how to move forward. And I think that those questions have been something that, not just for myself, but people who may be watching this or listening to this, sort of an average question that's really about all I would ask. And how are other people navigating that, to come up with the right numbers, with the reality, to trim back things, those kinds of things.
Sure. I think, on a lot of those too, because we have discussed this previously, but I think for a lot of people, it's not, there's, I hate the word intentional, but I think this is something that people kind of go through life, and as income goes up, there's potential mission creep where, suddenly it's like, oh, well, I didn't do this in the past because I couldn't afford it. Now I'm going to do that without maybe an eye towards what they need to do and what they need to save. And the one area I'd compliment you, Rob, is you've given yourself, a lot of people would be in immediate trouble if the work that they'd had for the last 20 years went away. And so you've given yourself some runway by having an emergency savings, and that's great. You've saved for your future retirement, you saved for your future self, I should say, through the TSP. And when you combine that with your pension that you have, you're probably in pretty good shape there. And I think for most folks, the key really is to spend an hour every 3 months and look at, all right, what did I spend? What came in and what went out? And as simple as that is, a lot of us don't do it. Or we have a tendency to maybe not tell the truth to ourselves, which is we look at our average costs and be like, oh, but that was an outlier. That one thing that happened in the last 3 months isn't going to replicate and happen again. And I think it's being honest with yourself in those situations to be like, well, the next financial hurdle or financial thing that's going to come along, whether it's maybe my car breaks down, maybe a tree falls on my roof, those sorts of things, you want to have that buffer. And that's something you've done through having that emergency savings. So the key is just being thoughtful, and I think revisiting it, because it's going to change, especially for someone like yourself. Your next, I can say, having started my own business 20 plus years ago, in those first 3-4 years, which is kind of where you're going with your freelance work, every quarter and certainly every year looked different than the past. And so it's just sitting back down and revisiting those things to kind of make sure you're on a clear path, and you know where you've gone, and hopefully you know where you're eventually headed. So I'd say that's kind of the key more than anything else. All right. Well, Rob, I want to thank you for being my guest on you were my inaugural guest. You're now going to be like the third or fourth guest, but still. I
ain't a problem. I don't have to be first all the time.
Well, in my heart, you're always going to be number one, Rob. You helped me out. Thank you for sharing your jagged path with us. After our failed recording, I thought I'd end the show with a lyric from a song. And since you have some credit as a manager of 3LG on the 1997 album Live at the State of the Union, I thought I'd pull a lyric from one of 3LG's songs. And, I try to do money stuff. And so I was like, well, there's a song called Sake of the Dollar. Okay. Unfortunately, I couldn't pull those lyrics. So, Rob, do you remember any other 3LG songs about retirement plans?
No, I don't. I think that was the only one.
Do you remember any lyrics from Sake of the Dollar?
I couldn't. I mean, I don't want to even do my friends such a disrespect by trying to repeat some of their lyrics. I wouldn't even want to do that.
Fair
enough.
That would
be embarrassing.
That's fair enough. So anyway, I had, since the show's about education, and I thought one of the things a lot of people, obviously music ties into your life. Being from the DC area, for those that are maybe clients of ours from Indianapolis, they don't maybe know this type of music, but DC has a form of music called go-go. It's an indigenous style of music to DC. Involves a real percussive beat, call and response between singer and audience, and a lot of improv. So not the deepest money lyrics, but from Chuck Brown, who's kind of the godfather of go-go.
He is.
He is. His song was called "We Need Some Money."
Yeah.
And so it's pretty simple. I won't do the call and response because it'll sound ultra goofy, but his, the response was, we need money, talking about money, money, money. So his started, the first lyric was, "A dollar bill is a friend of mine." And then you had the chorus, and he said, "I don't want to be a millionaire. I just want my proper share." Call and response. And then, "I don't need the wealth or fame. I just want enough to play the game." And then he finished with, "We need money, talking about money, money, money." So
talking about money, money,
money, money, money. So make sure to keep saving that money for your older self and continue on that jagged path. Rob, thanks again for your time. Greatly appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Mark. I really do appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Fantastic. Have a great day, Rob.
All right.